Hey guys, it's Scully. Welcome back. So, one of the things I started thinking about is that I'm sure quite a bit of us have trouble with things like sleeping or even staying asleep. Like, do you find yourself staying awake because you like to stay awake or because you have trouble sleeping as a whole? Well, that's what I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to talk about insomnia and having trouble sleeping. There's a difference between having insomnia and having trouble sleeping because they're kind of like they have a lot of overlap, but they're not always one and the same. You can have trouble sleeping sometimes and be able to sleep other times. And then you can have something like insomnia where you chronically have trouble sleeping, and even remedies such as taking melatonin or doing things to help try to wear yourself out don't work as much as they should. Now, like I said previously, there are a lot of things that can cause difficulty sleeping. It can be stress. If you are somebody who consumes a lot of caffeine, that can very definitely affect your ability to sleep even hours later because it takes various amounts of time for caffeine to leave the system, not only depending on how much of it you've had, but it also kind of depends on the person as well. Everybody has a different tolerance when it comes to caffeine. And then, of course, if you just feel like your mind is really active, it can just take a little extra time to get your mind to kind of relax enough to help you fall asleep at night. Now, when you have something more troubling like insomnia, not only is it more chronic, but it tends to be more resistant to things that would probably normally help. Like, you could probably take some sort of medication to help yourself sleep, or try not to drink too much caffeine. And believe it or not, things such as being on your computer or tablets, anything that has that kind of blue lighting from technology can also affect your ability to fall asleep. And that's kind of something that's not as well known to everybody, but that's becoming more aware over the years since a lot of people spend a lot of time in front of the computer, tablets, TV, that kind of stuff. So if you're really trying to get yourself to fall asleep, you're going to kind of want to stay away from those as much as you can if you're able to, and try to do something that maybe actually will tire you out more, like reading, but doesn't have as much stimuli from the light source that's coming from the device. So there's definitely some things that can kind of help cut back on sleep, but depending on the person, these things don't always work, and if they do, they take quite a bit of time. So things like having trouble sleeping and insomnia can become very troubling very quickly. And for people who have chronic insomnia, like they hardly ever get enough sleep really at all, they're more prone to a lot of health problems, clumsiness, heart problems. So it's easy to see why getting enough sleep is very important for your body. It gives your body time to kind of just rest and reboot, and your muscles rely on it to heal, and if you're sick you need more sleep as well to kind of bounce back. So being constantly deprived of sleep adds up very quickly in the long run, and it really is something that needs to be addressed if it's a chronic issue. Which is why, if you do have a problem such as this, really communicate with your doctor about it and see if there's anything they can do to try to help you. And if you're still not quite sure what's causing your difficulty to sleep or insomnia, that's also worth looking into, because there are a lot of things that can play into part. Like, not everybody who has like trouble sleeping knows that there could be some underlying health condition behind it. And then there are some people that if they're chronically stressed, they may not always know which stressor is causing it too, because if you're used to being stressed out about many things at a time, you just get used to it after a while. But it's easy to see how stress management can be very important, not only with just being healthier, but also things like getting enough sleep, because it tends to be a vicious cycle if you have something like stress really weighing you down on a regular basis, and then you can't sleep, and then because you can't sleep, you have trouble with things like work and other important things in your life. So what are some more common things that you can also try to help to relieve sleep? And again, this can depend on the person, because what works for one person may not work for somebody else. I know I've had times where I've tried to see if I could drink various types of, maybe like, let's say, chamomile tea, things that are kind of known to kind of help you wind down. Because for things like prescriptions, medications, obviously you're going to want to talk to a doctor about, because that's their forte. That's kind of more what they're supposed to do. But if you're talking about smaller kind of remedies, you can try things that are over the counter. If you do try things like melatonin, I would still ask your doctor about that first, because although it is over the counter, medications can, I actually did another video on medications, and one of the things I actually forgot to mention was that medications can and do interact with each other, not only with things like caffeine, but certain vitamins and even things like melatonin that are over the counter can interact with things. So if you're already on a lot of medication, you don't always want to be so quick to throw another pill into the cocktail, because unless you really know how it affects you and your doctor's on board with that. And that's why when you go to the doctor, they'll even ask you, like, do you take anything herbal? Do you take any vitamins? And it may sound like a silly question at first, but it's absolutely relevant depending on what you're taking. Because we don't always tend to realize that things like that can conflict with each other sometimes. Not always, but they can. So if you're not sure, definitely wanting to keep up with that. That way you don't, solve one problem and cause another one in the long run, because that can be not good. So insomnia and trouble sleeping is something that affects a lot of people. Most people have a fair amount of stress in their life, and this is one that especially can take some time to find a solution, not only because you may have to try a couple different things, but because everybody's different. And although two people can have trouble sleeping, one person could have insomnia where it's more chronic, and then the other could have difficulty sleeping before a really big day at work. But then once that day's over with, they tend to sleep more peacefully. And for some people, maybe they haven't even noticed a pattern with it. They just maybe notice, like, hey, I notice it more in the winter time, or I notice it more around like the holidays, or oh, I just notice it happening sometimes and I don't know what's causing it. So yeah, there's just so many factors that can play part of it, and it can be quite a struggle to get to the bottom of it. So like anything else, it does take a lot of patience, but it is a very insomnia itself is pretty rare, because that's more kind of extreme, but like difficulty sleeping though is quite common though. So although it is very frustrating, keep in mind it happens to really a lot of people at times. And if you find yourself getting like really frustrated with it, that is normal. But once you kind of learn how you tick, the things that work for you, work with your doctor, and things that really don't work. And sometimes it can take some troubleshooting as well. Like if you really aren't aware how much, like, okay, you drink coffee every day, but do you know how much coffee you drink or times of the day? Another really good rule of thumb with caffeine, if you can, is really try to, if you need to get enough sleep for the next day, really try to not only limit your caffeine, but try not to have any more of it but by let's say noon. Because usually after noon it starts to get later in the day. So if you have something to drink with caffeine in it at like 1 or 2 o'clock, it can be in your system for some people up to 12 hours, and we don't always think about that. So really kind of having an eye for detail and noticing that if you have a certain amount of coffee, and if you have it more than once in a day, if you do have that second cup, really kind of keep an eye on what time you drink it. Because we don't always think of something we eat or drink at like 3 o'clock still affecting us again at like 11 o'clock at night. So yeah, definitely takes some problem solving skills, but it can be done. And if any of you are having a difficult time right now, especially, everybody has a lot on their plate, but we'll all get through this. It's been a year into the pandemic now, but I'd like to think that we're making a lot of progress and things are getting better. So if things are looking a little glum right now, just keep going and just stay positive and just do your thing, and we'll get through this, okay? Have a great day, guys.